elitist intellectuals.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If they're
well,
better than
well,
just normal people.
yeah, I suppose for the most part, folks, well, of course, said no. Elitists, the elite educated are not better than anyone else. Well, it's against our religion as Americans to think that anybody's better than anyone else, even though, practically speaking, everybody's better than others in some ways. And I mean, so that's obviously an abstract, weird question. Most everybody, no one that I recall responded thinking of themselves as members of that elite educated group, and yet I think you are, actually. So if you think about Alaska, how many people have college educations in Alaska?
Above the national average, right?
I don't
Probably
think so.
below the national average. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe I just don't understand.
The latest I heard, and it was years ago, was roughly 25% of Alaska's population have some college.
Some.
Yes.
So they didn't graduate with a degree. They have some college.
This is one of the few states you can really get by without a degree too, though, I feel like, compared to the lower 48.
Yeah, I think, well, you know, I don't think I could have gotten this position
Yeah, sure.
without a PhD, whereas here, I showed up with a master's and I said, could I teach? And they said, hell yeah. You know?
Welcome to Alaska.
I've been here ever since, you know. By the way, that's not the same anymore. All the people in our department now, you know, they applied for one position. There were like 100 people that applied for it, all qualified, PhDs with publications and teaching experience, and you know, they weeded it down to 3, invited them up here, you know, they interviewed them, you know, and you know, after they were up here for a week and saw what the place was like, and then they were offered the job, they said no. Which is one of the reasons why I kept teaching, is because they kept trying to hire someone to take my place, and who was qualified, and they and they wouldn't stay, you know. That's, no, actually, all the ones we have are just, oh my God, they're so smart, so brilliant, and then they have me, you know. So that's okay. I'm glad for that.
I guess it depends on what your threshold of who we're including with the if you consider yourself to be an educated elite, like globally, yeah.
Right.
Include,
Right.
you know, third world nations and all that, developing nations.
And when you think about it, why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you paying money and then coming here to the classes that you
I
have?
have no idea.
No idea.
I don't pay a dime, so.
Well, you're
just here for-
kind of still in the age group where you have to. It's like you'll be arrested if you don't. Yes? No? If you're a high school student. Yes?
I'm not a high school student.
Not a high school student.
That's like,
But so,
there's another guy.
there are a couple though.
Yeah, you are.
There's quite a few that are born like 99 and 2000.
Yeah, because
97.
some are here because of the Alaska Middle College, right?
Yeah. You're not, but yes.
Right. Yeah. So in a sense, then it's free. Yes. So that's good. They could get an associate's degree for free, which is like already putting you way ahead of your peers, which, you're part of the elite educated.
But if you were to go just off of like high school education, I feel like a lot of countries exceed us in public education. So I mean,
Sweden.
Yeah.
and not just the normal culprits either. Though I feel like a lot of even developing countries have better. So, I went to South Carolina public education, so where our bar is pretty low.
Thanks.
Like second or third worst.
So that would be my suggestion, is that you're actually part of that educated elite in my view, and you're in position where your whole life now you'll be really one of the state leaders. Whatever job you get, you'll be surrounded by a lot of people that won't be as sophisticated as you, not have the kind of experience you have, so that kind of the obligation on you being good, smart, learning as much as you can, so you're going to be as effective as possible, see the problems and fix them. You might not be thinking of that right now at this age, but it's going to happen. You're going to be among the top people that you'll be working with, and that's going to suddenly surprise you when you realize you could be the one in charge, right? So, but yeah, at the same time, we still don't think of ourselves as better than others. But we can follow that into Hobbes and think about how Hobbes is the beginning of social contract theory. So, I mean, there's some others there, Rousseau, Locke, but notice both Rousseau and Locke are influenced by Hobbes. Hobbes's teacher is Sir Francis Bacon, among others. I mean, that was just one. But Hobbes is bright. Math wasn't his strongest suit, although he was brilliant enough in math that he got involved in all sorts of arguments with his contemporaries in math, and they just all thought he was wrong, and generally speaking, it seems like he was wrong, although have you ever dealt with the issue of squaring the circle? That if you take a circle, is there a mathematical formula that you could use in order to get an estimate of the square area of a circle that matches a square? Obviously, it's only going to be a rounding. You have to round it, but that was the issue that a lot of people got into. But he's an empiricist. He's a British empiricist, although when they talk about British empiricism, Locke is the one that they usually think of as the beginning of British empiricism, because he's the one that first comes up with the recognition or the hypothesis that we cannot actually see, hear, taste, touch, smell, feel, I said touch, objects in themselves. Everything that we experience through our senses. So our senses, our human senses, of course, are kind of intermediaries between us and the object. So strictly speaking, an object doesn't have color. It just appears to have color to us because of the way our eyes work. It appears to feel a certain way because of the way our senses work. It has a certain heat because of the way our senses pick up the feel of the heat, etc. It tastes, an orange doesn't taste to itself, but it tastes the way it does to us because of our tongues and the way, right? So Locke is the one that does that. Hobbes, though, is the one that follows Aristotle, recognizes that all of our knowledge comes to us through our senses. And we seek happiness or pleasure and avoid pain. So for Hobbes, we're like machines, very much like machines. In fact, we do have minds, but the minds are physical for Hobbes, not spiritual, like for Descartes, who's in the continent, in England. British don't go that way for the most part. They think of the mind as a physical thing. So when we think of what's the difference between a brain and a mind?
The brain is the thing that's in your skull, and the mind is the thing within the brain that you use and you have that's constantly working while you're alive.
Would you have a mind if the brain stopped working?
Yeah.
No. So that's kind of a British way of thinking of it. If you think of the body dying and the soul is released, that's kind of a continental European way of thinking of it. The soul is released, right? So the soul is like a non-physical part of you. Today we might still think about that if we're thinking in terms of non-locality and quantum particles and stuff of that sort. It's kind of neat. I don't know how the heck I got into it, but so this is one of these online email groups. I don't know how I got into it, but they must email one another like 50 times a day. I mostly just delete, but every once in a while I read some of what is going on. So Shah, I guess, is in India in one of the institutes there, the IT Institute or something, and they're arguing about whether or not particles have consciousness, self-consciousness. And that's pretty weird.
Yeah.
And the problem of knowledge and stuff. Pardon?
Oh, joke. Peter was going to have a heyday with that one. Particles actually did exist. They did have their own consciousness.
Who was going to have a?
PETA, people.
Oh, the
The
PETA?
ethical treatment of animals.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you can't destroy them.
So
You
there are
can't
plus
torture
sides.
them either.
There are plus sides.
But if we're trying to figure out where is your consciousness, is it a result of the brain with the way it functions, or is it in the smaller particles? That's where they're. So that's kind of cool. And this guy's a physicist in a school where he's teaching other people. So, and he's making fun of the maths faculty, which is kind of fun. But so, I don't know, if you want to get on their email list, let me know and I think I can sign you up. I mean, about 50 such emails a day. Kind of fun. Or not. So, for Hobbes, we're machines, physical machines, and our brains are part of that machine. So all of the information that goes into our brain comes through our senses. Famously, John Locke, who will follow Hobbes, will argue that we have a blank slate at birth, right? A tabula rasa, if you've ever heard of that expression, right? And so all of our experience writes on our brain, right? By the way, that's totally wrong. Today we know that actually by the time you're born, you've already got all kinds of stuff, programs running in your head, and you're well prepared, hopefully, for the social environment that you will be involved in. But in any case, this is Hobbes, and what kind of stimulates your responses to things is your learning from your experience to avoid pain and to increase happiness, right? Now, then when you put us into what he calls the state of nature, which is a hypothetical, is not arguing, I don't think, that there was ever such an original state of nature, right? But in this hypothetical state of nature, without government, what would life be like? And we get this nasty, brutish, and short, actually there's a fourth, isn't there? Solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So life is really sucky, basically, for most people. Have you been starting that book by Steven Pinker? It sounds like...
Got about an hour into it, and it's on audio. I probably should have picked it up in paperback.
Well, I'm roughly around page 90, and he talks about how we're living in the best of all times right now, because if you go back and you look at how violent people have been, he talked about that in his earlier book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, that we've gotten less and less violent all these years. We've got better health. We've got more food available to us. We've got obviously better technology, all sorts of improvements that, boy, if you were thinking of living any other time, you probably wouldn't want to. You know, now is the best time of all that we know of. But I mean, we have all kinds of archaeological evidence that you know, people used to have roughly a 30-year life expectancy. Now, if you made it past 43, your chances of making it to 60 or so are
Yeah,
probably
that's
pretty
what
good.
People say.
Yeah,
Life expectancy,
yeah.
because once you reach a certain point, you're still
Yeah.
can't.
but and part of what did that too was the life expectancy of an infant.
Mortality rate.
I mean, even in like the 1860s, you read biographies of people, and they had 5 children, 1 survived. You know, it's just absolutely. You know, part of it is don't visit Italy. You know, because you know every time these different people. Even I remember John Dewey took his family to Italy, and each time he went there, one of his sons died. They would get sick of like malaria or something, yellow fever or something, I don't know, different things. It just kill you. You get an infection from playing tennis, and you get a boil, and it breaks, and it gets infected, and you die from it. Imagine what a rotten way to end your life, death by tennis. You know, that just sounds. Yeah, we've got medicines that cure us from all that stuff. We don't even think about it. You know, did you get your tetanus shot? Yeah, right. You know, whatever, right?
Yeah, vaccine.
Oh, let's not go there.
But
It's like,
bad
I'm more likely to believe that there is a God with a nice beard that's looking down on us right now than vaccines are destroying the lives, futures of people.
I have trouble with that because if he's sitting on a throne in space, I'm wondering what's keeping him in the
It
chair.
works for Thanos, and it's you know, a lot of that has to do with personal perception, because you know you think therefore you are. If you're the one that conceptualized the entire world, created all that matter, why would you just not be there? You know.
Monster type guy.
Like a Yeti or like Cthulhu, like one of the older gods.
It's psychological. I started noticing when I had the beard started turning white,
Do you know Cthulhu?
students would like act like they trusted me more. And one of the psychology professors explained to me, it's the beard. Yeah. In fact, I couldn't get over it. The same thing, you know, when it started turning white, women started holding the door for me when I was like, you know, it's like, oh, let me get this for you.
Oh,
You know, like,
shit.
you know, thank you.
Oh wow.
Yikes.
But so, nasty, solitary, poor, brutish, short. He's describing the way life was for a lot of people.
But simple.
But you know what? It wasn't for him, because he lived till he was, what, 91? And he was playing tennis. King Charles II, riding by on his horse, sees him standing there in the street, and he goes, Hobbes, my old tutor, I owe you a pension. So he's like living till old age. What's odd, he's buried in...
The south of France in the catacombs.
No. CK. So this is the church where, why is that there? This is actually on the floor. So that's where his
Well, it says
Is that's not Latin, is it? What is that?
Yes. So
what is that?
his grave.
Clearly.
Ah.
What language?
Latin.
Got it. Thank you. Sorry. I was just like,
Year of our Lord,
Yes.
16.
Yeah, I saw Amazon sign and I was like,
Oh,
that's
okay.
Latin.
So yeah, if you want to go see his grave, he's in Alt Hucknall, which is the smallest village in England, according to their sign.
About linguistics, such a rapid transfer from Latin to Middle English to Modern English, and then back for like a couple hundred years, and then to the Renaissance, more kind of like more modern English. Like that, this seems to be incredibly rapid evolution of language, right? Or am I wrong? Am I missing something somewhere?
I suspect it's always been like that, though.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, I have books in Old German, and like, they're not that old. Those are school books and stuff, you know.
Yeah,
everywhere.
I think it changes pretty rapidly in all languages.
If you look at our language now compared to how, at least how we speak, you know.
50, 60 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't talk anything like I did when I was a kid. You know, it's all completely different now.
It's amazing.
Hamburger, cheeseburger,
Exactly.
SpaghettiOs.
Technically, isn't that just an accent in one language?
What if you change enough of the words,
The neat new
syllables?
spaghetti you can eat with a spoon. You know.
That would be called a sport. I don't think I could eat
Yeah,
spaghetti
oh no, that's clean.
with a spoon.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Hobbs. Let's
When
go
did
to
he
Hobbs.
die?
It's an eyebrow.
This
Yeah,
was,
your
I
eyebrows.
can't read Latin, so 91 of what, maybe?
I had a cashier tell me that the other day, and I was like, huh.
Well, thank you.
I enjoyed that compliment way more than I thought I would.
This is 91, so I'm wondering,
16, no, 7,
I don't know.
had to be
Watch,
1691.
Grand Budapest Hotel. That was.
Yeah.
It is a fantastic.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I was amazed.
Nice stash.
79.
It's a little
79.
different. I like
Got
it.
it.
It took me a second to realize where we were going with it. But
So here's how this goes.
Alright.
Being machines and being primarily interested in our own pleasure, in a state of nature, a hypothetical state of nature. I never, as I saw, argues that this was actually the state of affairs any place. Although I guess it could, what was the Lord of the Flies? If you read the book, the kids all end up on an island and basically they deteriorate from a civilized state to kind of a state of nature.
Kind of like the 100.
The one.
I did not appreciate that when I was younger.
Yeah.
Until, I grew up and read it again, got bored.
Mad Max, right? You're talking about like Mad
Right,
Max. the
right.
Road
So we
Warrior?
can hypothesize
Okay.
that. And he argues that it's everybody in the state of nature has all their rights, the right to anything they want. The trouble is, if I like your water bottle, I can just take it from you. And if you fight me over it, I can smack you over the head, or, I have the right to do whatever I want to you. You have the right to do whatever you, right? Everybody has all these rights. Well, of course, none of that's good for us because we all basically have a war against each. It's dog eat dog, right? Everybody fights everybody else, right? And that doesn't work. Even for Conan the Barbarian, who's, remember, I showed you the movie of him, right?
Mr. Universe status.
What about an uneducated early man whose only early emotions were rage and mating and eating?
That wouldn't be early man. That would be.
And he has to know not to use FedEx, or to use FedEx and not.
You almost had it. You were
Almost
so
had it.
close.
So close.
So close in that some part.
But anarchy isn't chaos. And this free will does not necessarily mean the influence of
Oh,
one person upon
I'm
another.
saying that if that was an absolute
This
truth,
guy
early men
goes.
would have killed each other off on the
Uh,
It's Timothy.
Pardon?
Wasn't this a Super Bowl commercial?
It looks
Maybe.
Oh,
Next time, use FedEx.
Jesus.
It is like a Super Bowl commercial they used to.
So that would be back in the state of nature. Even FedEx wasn't invented yet, so sorry, that was just dumb. But I happen to like that commercial. However, so what happens even among the strongest individuals in such a state is we have to form a social contract with someone else, so that
Yeah.
when I'm going to sleep, and I need someone to watch me and make sure that he doesn't kill me and take all my stuff, right? And so I form an agreement with you that while you're sleeping, I'll protect you, and while I'm sleeping, you protect me. Okay. The problem with that is that if you really like my stuff and you agree, okay, and I lie down and I fall asleep, you kill me and take my stuff anyway, right? Because I don't need, I need someone else to kind of supervise the contract and make sure that everybody follows it. So of course we end up with groups, larger and larger groups, until of course eventually you get to the point where he says the only solution is a monarch who then has all the executive, right? You execute the others, right? So he has the executive power to enforce the contracts. But in doing that for Hobbes, I give up all those rights I had in the state of nature in order to make things so that the king has the power he needs, right? But there are some contractual rights that we agree on. So, for example, life, liberty, property, that kind of thing. If you have, your property, and the king is going to protect your property, right? So the king can take your property if he needs it, but one of his obligations is to protect your property unless it really is absolutely essential to the state to take it from you, right? So we do get rights, but the rights come from the contract. Now, the founding fathers of our wonderful experiment thought that those rights were God-given. And I don't know really where they got that idea, as it doesn't really seem to be in Hobbes, although they're logical. I mean, the kinds of things that a human being would like to have rights to seem kind of structured by the nature of society, right? But at the same time, he doesn't seem to say that these are God-given rights. These come from the contract. So the social contract theory that gives us our explanation for why our government is the best form of government, right? The rights come from the contract. And by the way, we change these rights depending on what we, so like the recent arguments over healthcare. Healthcare is a right. How many of you have heard people argue that?
Mm-hmm.
Where does that come from? They didn't even have such a thing in the original Constitution. They didn't think of it, right? They didn't have any such thing. The argument over gun rights, right? That's all part of what's going on. Obviously, Washington didn't have an AR-15, obviously, right?
That's a semantic argument.
Yeah.
And the whole reason why healthcare works in this particular instance, in socialistic way, is because everything else has escalated or compounded or exponentially increased in cost, so that literally the expense of life is becoming more tied with your enjoyment or your ability to, make something, a legacy for yourself. whether it be if you just wanted to have a bunch of kids or if you wanted to start a company, everything just becomes more expensive when you incorporate all there, and then the average level of,
We have way more things that make life wonderful. It's more, actually, I'm not sure how much more expensive it is. How much was a microwave back in 1776?
adjusted for inflation.
It wasn't worth anything because it didn't exist. Quite expensive.
Yeah, well, I know the internet was a lot less expensive.
That did exist in '79. Now there
I
were
mean,
networks.
you know, all the emails that they sent to one another that we lost because, of course, the internet. No, wait, I'm obviously just joking.
That was DARPA, right? That was that was DARPA though, right? That was like that's when they were first experimenting with it.
DARPA?
But yeah,
I don't know when DARPA first started.
It was the late
It
'70s.
was 70s or
Yeah.
What was it, 1770s?
No, that's no. Thankfully, if
Yeah, I was joking that George Washington, you know, the Continental Army, didn't have internet
that
connections with.
right, and but would he have sacrificed all of that glorious battle script if he would have been able to get that information a day ahead of a time? You know, if you had that steam-powered locomotive, if you had that railway built, if you had,
I had that much information, I would have lived in England.
a lot less far. It's less. You didn't have to travel that far.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, if you think about it,
And better.
most of the folks that went to the the new world, the new world, were the riffraff that got kicked out of Europe.
Oh, and Irish.
The crazies.
The Protestants escaping
Yeah.
from the persecution in Ireland, working the boats.
But the main concern I have here is I've heard people feel that rights are God-given. Haven't you heard that?
It's kind of like
Yeah.
the same concept of Christianity or religion claiming ownership of morality. It's kind of crap and bullshit.
Wait,
I love it.
But you know,
Tell me how
the
you
thing
really
is,
feel.
you know, if you look at history, it's very clear that this is the period when the concept of human rights was invented.
talking about the golden rule, like do unto others type thing, as they would, you know, do unto you.
No. Human rights in the sense that are protected by the Constitution. Those, you know, the Bill of Rights, right?
But that was the
So
first
if I-
time they had that like a Bill of Rights presented. It was just
Yeah.
that's not. My ghost. That's not. But it was typically for like business purposes, not for generalizations. But I'm running.
There were rights before the Bill of Rights that were documented. I mean, Magna Carta was one of Napoleon's.
The Magna Carta.
Mhm.
Napoleon was actually after it.
I hear a lot of like other like English speaking well, other European countries they are still having a hard time with free speech. Like there's this guy that got arrested for putting something on Twitter.
That's
Depends on-
funny.
Yeah.
Depends on which country.
Could you imagine?
That's.
He was like really worried too. Like he didn't tell his son or anything. He wasn't able to call him.
I mean, you can't say anything or do anything too fascist in Germany anymore. You can't do a Nazi salute or anything like that. It's illegal.
Oh, yeah, but that's been since World War II.
Yeah. I was just going.
I believe this was the first. Even in England, they have the Magna Carta and they have
Yeah.
traditions, but they don't have a constitution. France had a constitution, but multiple ones, and they didn't do very well.
They also have healthcare. They have great
Right,
healthcare.
right. But I mean, isn't it pretty clear that healthcare as a human right is a recent invention?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it is.
You're running into logistical issues though with population.
But beforehand,
Wait, is that relevant to
spiritual
the
rights was the
conversation?
thing, where you had the right for a blessing, I guess, when you died. I guess something along those lines is probably
Yeah.
the equivalent.
Well,
Yeah.
an interesting thing is, in the United States, it's considered heresy for you to believe that you have the right to choose your own beliefs. So Peter Berger wrote, by the way, this is the Museum for the Constitution in Philadelphia, if you're ever there. Each of these is one of the amendments. So it's kind of neat. They have, it's a great show for.
Not the actual, all the actual scripture is still in the Congress library, right? Library
Oh,
of Congress.
right, that's just a display
Okay.
of the amendments.
It's
That's
not like
the
it's
actual.
not like traveling, you
No,
know.
it's
okay.
obviously a,
A piece of art.
yeah.
It was stone.
all the amendments were actually.
By-
Nicolas Cage.
By Nicolas
I was
Cage,
gonna
that's
say.
right.
National treasure.
Now I forget what I was going to show.
You was gonna be something very intelligent though.
It was. It
Could have
was.
been national treasure.
Totally a cartoon.
But I don't remember because
That's okay.
it stopped to say this. But
Magna Carta, parliamentary,
I showed you my picture of the Code of Hammurabi.
I've
No?
seen it. It's
Yes.
awesome.
You see the one in
The Louvre.
Philadelphia? Oh, the Louvre. Okay. 'Cause the
Nobody was
one-
there. Everyone was digging around the Mona Lisa and everything else, and I was the only one. That was the coolest thing to me.
That was
It's
awesome.
huge.
what are we getting ready to look at?
Code of Hammurabi. Oh, I thought.
Yeah, this is.
Whoa.
We okay? That's the copy that they made in, well, they didn't make it there, but it's as large as me.
Bigger.
On a pedestal.
It might have been on pedestal.
What is it?
The code, the stela with the Code of Hammurabi,
First written law. Public, so it was made public. He
as far as we
forgot
know.
where, yeah. Somewhere in Mesopotamia, I forgot which city it was in. Dude wrote down his law, and everyone could see it, or everyone could read it, I suppose.
So basically, some guy was like, "Here's the law."
Well, he was
put it
the
out.
king.
Okay.
There were 450 plus rules on it. And they're very specific.
But it was like the first like codified law that we have. Like, yeah.
Mesopotamia, how long ago was this?
Oh shit, that was what?
Sumer.
1000 BC?
Sumer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
5000 BC.
older than Egypt.
Before, yeah, I was gonna say,
Jesus.
before
Yeah.
Egypt's rise in 3000 BC.
Sorry for my
So
lack
it was
of
cool seeing it. It really was. So damn.
You saw the original? Oh.
photography.
And nobody,
that's-
nobody was interested in it. Nobody.
That's basalt, right?
Well, so
Looks like it was black, but
the main argument I have, and I usually have lots of folks disagree, is the idea that the human rights that we see in the Constitution, in the social contract, those were invented by those individuals that made the Constitution. Now, Jefferson got his ideas from his three heroes, who included Francis Bacon, John Locke, and Sir Isaac Newton. Obviously, the ideas in the Constitution would have come from John Locke for the most part. So, what about slavery? Slavery a right? You're allowed to own slaves.
Well, that was heavily debated.
It was
But
never
it was.
mentioned that it was expected
I
to
mean,
be
I don't know
swept
if
out in the
that's
next
anymore.
Yeah.
80 years, however, due to any problematic expectancies of presidencies, it was not snuffed out.
Well, how do you? I mean, I've seen individuals, lecture on this, and they argue all human beings have these natural rights, and you point out, well, like the life, the right to liberty. Guess what? We take liberty away from people all the time. We lock them up, throw away the key, or we even kill them, right? How do we justify that when we have?
You protect the freedom of the majority.
Yeah, that's how you would.
So we can take liberty away from people. They don't have,
I mean, it's
Liberty.
a sword right, but you can use rights.
You can even kill them legally.
yeah, we could even legally kill them. Plus, of course, in the original contract, there were the rights of many to own other people. So how did that work? Well, John Locke, who is the source of a lot of the ideas that Jefferson had, argues that in a state of war, if I'm trying to kill you and you're trying to kill me, and I win, but I don't kill you, I had the right to kill you, but if I capture you instead, you now become my property. And at that point, I can do with you what I choose to. If I want to, at some point, kill you anyway, because now you're inconvenient, well, I can do that. But if instead I decide to use you to serve me in some capacity, work in the cotton field, then you're my property, and I have the right to my property, right? That's another one of the rights, is the right to have your property and keep your property, and others are not allowed to take your property in the contract, right? So for John Locke, slaves are legal and part of the contract, but notice that means that not everybody gets liberty as part of the contract. So who does? Who does get liberty? Wives?
Clearly.
In the context of they
No.
are written in.
Children?
If they were written in back at that time, they didn't consider black people to be people, and they didn't use property, just like that.
Well,
That
that
just
actually,
becomes a moral thing.
I read a book that said that the very first person to own slaves in the colonies
They
was
were
a black
white.
man. Yeah.
Really? Were
Yep.
they white?
I thought it would be the Spanish.
I'm taking U.S. history, and she's arguing that the first people that were slaves, they were indentured slaves, but they came from England. People that couldn't afford.
Right, but the person who owned them was black.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That sounds neat.
That was
Well, not
in.
maybe, but-
Astonishing.
It's astonishing,
That's the
yeah.
word I'm looking for.
Yep.
Sorry, don't make that mistake.
You can say it's awesome.
It's not- it's
Yeah,
trapped.
see? Huh. Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, what turned out to be the case was that the British or the Irish
Yep.
were terrible slaves. Their life expectancy was about 4 years, and they couldn't, if you put them to work out in the fields, they just couldn't stand the heat.
They said the same thing with the Indians who weren't used to, or they were dying from disease too, so they ended up going,
Yeah, the disease didn't help them out too much.
yeah.
But the black slaves were very, very strong, held up for many years, and could do a lot of work out in the fields. As a result, they were much more expensive, but they were worth it.
Yeah, the whole black people aren't like people thing with like slavery. That was just bullshit.
In one of my U.S. history classes, they said it was like some Indian chief that recommended using African chiefs rather, I mean not African chiefs, African slaves over Indian slaves.
Well, kind of behooves him, doesn't it?
Yeah, that was probably the thing, but
God, you don't want us, you want
Yeah.
those folks from over
Yeah,
there.
they're
Yeah.
better.
Don't capture us, capture these people.
That's-
it's true though.
And they were able to run away easier anyway because they knew the land better than the colonists.
Let's go back home.
They just
That's like the bear standing there, with the scope is aiming at the bear and is smiling and pointing to the one next to him right now.
Yep.
But I suppose where I would like to disagree is that it's not so much that they weren't considered people, as that they weren't considered part of the social contract.
Yeah.
They weren't members of the contract. The individuals who were members were the citizens. Who got to be the citizens? Well, that's what's evolved over time. Because when did women get the vote?
yeah.
1960 something.
I thought it was the 70s.
June 4th, 1919.
Something. The fact that it was
The
in
19th
19 says
Amendment,
something.
right? The 19th, it's easy to remember, 1919, June 4th.
I thought it was later.
So did I.
All right.
What's this class, 1919?
When's this class?
That's what we, oh yeah.
That's just easy to remember because 1919.
Well, it was
A lot of
ratified
19.
on 1920.
Yeah. So I mean.
But when did black males get the vote?
That was later.
Talking Greek myths or
That
full
was
vote?
Well,
Pardon?
during
Talking Greek myths of a vote or full vote?
Greek myths?
Greek
No, the
myths?
3/5 vote or the full vote. Which one are you referring
well,
to?
3/5 didn't count for voting. They weren't.
Yeah, when did they get the vote? That was after the 13th
That was just for
Amendment.
taxation and representation.
1965 is what it's saying.
For women?
19. No, for, I might be wrong, but right now I'm looking.
It had to be before 1919 because black
oh, for,
males.
Oh, black males. Oh, well,
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, if we're talking about who has the rights, isn't it obvious? I don't really have to argue. Does anybody want to argue the point that the rights come from the contract? Who's the member? And if you break the contract, we could throw you in jail. So if you kill someone, you've lost these rights stipulated by law, right? We've got laws for all of that, right? So we know what you've lost, whether you can have weapons afterwards once you get out, if you're a felon, whether you could vote, whether you're a felon. Anybody know if you're a felon?
Depending on the crime, you can appeal after so many years to get particular rights back,
Yes.
and it varies.
So it's
from crime
pretty
to
clear.
crime.
Social contract theory doesn't. What about
Same.
what about illegal aliens living in Oakland?
That's a touchy subject.
California. Yes? And that's kind of interesting. How do you spell Oakland? That's pretty bad, right? Speech therapy? I didn't know the mayor in Oakland needed speech therapy.
I think that's a separate word set. Because you look at it, speech therapy all on its own.
I was hoping. What did she
Well,
just say?
I don't know. Let's listen to this speech and find out.
Well, what, sir?
Yesterday, I learned information from multiple sources that there is potentially an ICE activity planned in the Bay Area that could be
This is
starting
the mayor of
as soon
Oakland.
as today. My priority is to keep this community safe. It is not my wish to panic people, but to ensure that they're prepared with information, that they know their rights as well as their responsibilities, and know about the resources that this community offers. Residents should know that they do not have an obligation to open their doors if an ICE official knocks. Additionally, employers need to be aware of new laws that took effect just this year that limit their ability to assist ICE with actions regarding employees unless they have a signed warrant.
Can she get in legal trouble for that?
That-
I'm thinking she should,
Yeah.
because she's basically abetting
that's-
criminals.
We're talking ICE is the immigration.
Immigration police.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if she was arrested for abetting criminals, but,
That's not, I mean, that is just bad all the way around.
because when you get to the
What gave
the
her
problem
the-
here, alien
Somebody feels
migrants
very alone.
or, right, you know, individuals that are here illegally, what rights do they have?
None.
Actually, there's a lot here.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right?
well, they are human beings, and we,
See, that's where we go wrong, is I think that we listen to this whole, like, these are our rights and stuff, but God forbid if another human, just like you and I, comes into our right circle here, like, then it becomes a moral issue. It's not a right thing.
Well, it's because they didn't do it legally like everyone else does.
The problem is, though, is that we're continually making it harder and harder for people to actually come into the circle
Yeah, it's
and get
because
rights.
our population continually getting bigger and bigger, where we should be taking it as illegally each year.
Really?
Discussion that could take the whole class period. It's
This,
hard to-
this is a discussion that could take the whole.
Did I open a can of worms?
Yes, you did.
I can easily shut it.
You can try.
One of them
You
worms
can.
that-
Let it try.
I would just put cellophane on top of it with a rubber band for now, you know,
I mean, I can save it for a rainy day, but,
Kombucha has.
yeah, I think good for her, yeah, maybe technically under our laws, that's not
I'm not the first time I've
technically
drank it.
legal, but.
It's the second.
One, like.
Look, if they're
1/2 of
abiding
1%
citizens,
said
like, okay,
3%.
if they're abiding illegal immigrants,
Makes
if
me
they're not
enlightened.
doing anything wrong, if they're
I'm
just
enlightened
trying to
for
get
drinking this.
a janitor job that no one wants so that they can feed their kids instead of being like in amongst like cartel groups that are trying to shoot them down all the time, like, good for them. Good for them. They're taking a job. I see you, I know.
There's a damn educational vacuum you have going on over here. It's lopsided and you can't please everybody all at once. But you can't even get anybody wanting the whole economy to be stable. Everybody's trying to make these wild swings and advancements when nobody has even been able to refine the idea of what would it take to just make sure that everybody's life would be improving, even at a lower grade than it has been since the 50s. You have the largest boom in the economy, but yes, the largest shifts with the more mega corporations that have been shifting energies and efforts all over the world away from here, so where you literally have some of the most dilapidated parts of our country, some of the most overpopulated parts of our country, even without the immigration, that needs the most assistance that can't get it, because you have, one, people without hope, and two, the focus isn't even on what's important, which is making sure that everybody that is here, that's supposed to be here, has the ability to do things to make themselves better. And if you don't have that, it doesn't matter how many other people are here illegally doing jobs that nobody else wants to do because people are unwilling to relocate. You're going to have that no matter what you do. The problem is that it should still, notwithstanding, be a problem. It shouldn't be that they shouldn't be
is
here.
everybody having as much fun as Adam?
So the way you're gonna solve it is just by deporting them and then refusing to let them come
Wait,
back.
I didn't say that. What I did say is that
our immigration system, because it is too hard. We have higher standards on immigrants than we do on some of our school activities that
There we go.
require children to complete. But at the same time, yeah, just deporting people who haven't broken the law except for being here illegally may not be the exact reason.
No.
You are disrupting people and stuff like that. But by sitting there and having the mindset that if they're not hurting anybody and stuff like that, then why should we let them get away? Because they might have family members that come to the country because they got in. That
it's a
will be
systemic
that
issue.
But
Yeah.
also, that's kind of straw manning right there, but it is a very, very valuable, valid concern.
What about kids?
Oh, the DACA stuff. Oh my goodness. Oh,
My mom was illegal a couple years ago for a little bit because she forgot to renew her visa or green card, whichever one she's got.
Oh, that's from England.
My-
She just got her citizenship last year.
my parents never told us how the heck our ancestors got here, but the one thing I know for sure is that none of them lived in the same place where they grew up. Everybody moved, and then when they became adults, they moved, and when their kids became adults, they moved, so that basically we're homeless when you get right down to it. We've got no place where we could say our roots are here, so that I could go to the cemetery and say, there's great grandpa, there's grandpa, there's my father, and there's me. Hey, how did I get there? It's not going to happen yet.
Freshly done.
And that's one of
Yeah,
the best.
there's
things
my
about it.
grave. Who's putting?
It's one of the best things about it is the fact that we have such a heavily transient population going where the work is. That nobody's putting down the same type of roots because you have to go where you are needed. And when people have that mindset, which is the hardest part, is that paradigm shift that everybody else is having such a hard time grasping.
But it's not everybody.
Not
I have been at a place where I was shown around by a young man who pointed out that he had thousands of years of ancestors in this one cemetery. And everyone in the village was a relative, uncle at least.
Well, that's
Aunt.
scary. That's dangerous.
I mean,
You know, so, I mean, because
kind of my village.
his families and the families, all that were living there, were basically people that had been living there for all of the didn't have any record.
At that point, it's tribal land, right?
Well, sure, yeah, sure. So there are people like that. When did those folks become citizens?
Some of them still aren't. I was just listening to
Native?
something along the
Yeah.
lines. No, they made
Which is really
big
funny.
treaties between some tribes that still are technically not citizens but function within the system. Now, in Canada or whatnot, we're just going over a few days ago where, you know, there are some of these smaller tribes that were literally dying off. You know, they made all of these agreements, and now those treaties and agreements are coming to fruition. They're having to pay out, and there's supposedly, you know, pockets of unceded land that still belongs to these desperate smaller tribes that were just, you know, acquiesced to any demand they had because they figured that they weren't going to be here.
So what's a good quiz question? How do we solve this? What's your
How do we
suggestion?
solve immigration?
Yeah.
Shit.
let's
How do we
go.
solve?
That's the $1 million question.
Yeah, how would you solve this? If you were a politician,
Build the wall.
Fuck's sake.
if you were a politician,
joking.
how
I
would you
know,
solve
I
it?
know.
The wall is like one of the best memes though of this decade. Let's be honest here. Like the wall's not going to do absolutely shit except offer us a defensive structure.
Well, you know, it's
in
gonna-
case somebody attacks us from the south.
The zombies.
And don't forget,
Zombie wall.
Mexico's paying for it, right?
As far as I know,
Well,
Oh my God,
I'll use the
please
same
don't.
technical expression. You know, this is going to screw a lot of wildlife. You know, because they don't
The Chief of Commerce
recognize
can't
it.
go across the border when
Not
he
only
leaves.
that,
I've been there, and you know, there's an awful lot of there that isn't there. And it's like nothing is there. You know, so there. I mean, there's just miles and miles and miles and miles of where is there. I mean, you know, it's just like nothing.
Yeah, it's not fun to drive through.
There's no way to even build. There was no road near it even. You know, so you know, it was always just the imposed line. You know, that they would say whether you were on U.S. territory or Mexico territory. It's just kind of crazy.
Kinda like all
But
the
you're
walls
right.
that
You're
they have
right.
separating the
It's
barrios
like
now.
such a neat name that I mean, you know, build the wall. You know, it's just so fun to say. You know, and make Mexico pay for the wall, which
I
apparently.
looked at where they actually wanted to build it, and they literally have to move a freaking mountain to put it in place. And from the last time I heard, there's like two different things from the scientific community saying that there's a wildlife endangerment or something like that. The wall being created.
That's what I would-
wipe
yeah.
out species of something.
Yeah, it's just like the fence along the Glen Highway to keep the moose out.
Oh,
You
it's
know
fun
how
to
well
watch
that
them
works.
What there
Yeah,
already
it's
is
so dumb.
there already is a fence separating the border in a lot of spots. Like there already
The high
is.
traffic area, so
Yeah, there's
not really working too well.
that. It keeps people out of those areas, right?
Oh, good job.
I don't know.
It's just,
So
who
what,
knows? I mean,
realistically,
it's
what
kinda
kind of
nice.
quiz question would be a good one here? I mean, was this a fun topic or just?
This one,
It went
it
a
can
different
be.
direction.
Is
This
it
opened the
philosophical
forum.
Yeah, this
or
really-
an illegal
Guys.
immigrant if he's done
She's
that?
the culprit.
Shouldn't she be held legally responsible for?
That's
No, good
That's-
for her.
oh,
Well, there's
all
a
right.
good question.
Yes, good question. Should the Oakland City Mayor be held legally culpable for encouraging illegal aliens to break the law? Well, they already broke the law.
Well-
What's a better way to put the question? Should she be
Aiding and
considered aiding and abetting?
Now, ICE is a federal agency, right?
Yes.
She's state, like federal, then. I mean, she doesn't have to listen to them.
Well, if
Well, I
you're
mean,
state,
she's
you
also
have to
just
follow the federal
reminding
law.
people of their rights in and of themselves there.
Aiding and what?
Abetting.
Well, and it sounds like California's been passing laws deliberately to try to stop.
Oh yeah, it's great.
They have the safe zone for safe cities. something like
Yeah,
that.
what is
Yeah.
it called? Like
what can we go into what that is? What is that?
Safe cities. Safe
I
zone.
forgot what
Oh,
that's
safe
called.
Go there
cities,
and they're
that's
not
where
gonna- they're
certain
not gonna-
cities.
Talking about sanctuary zones?
Sanctuary.
Sanctuary,
not
there you
safe
go.
cities,
Yes.
not
Yeah.
safe spaces, sanctuary zones.
Yeah.
So, no deportation.
Yeah,
They
Yeah.
were talking about that in Anchorage too. And that
They
was
were.
like,
I can see
whoa.
that. I imagine there's a lot of illegal immigrants here.
Oh my
yeah,
goodness,
there
yeah.
Yeah.
And not from the
If
south
they
of
wanna
the
come
border,
into the
from
country and
west
live
of
here
the
and
border.
last, they should just give them citizenship, cause good on them.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, you made it all the way up here.
Yeah, if they live here long
You
enough.
hustled, man.
If you give them the day citizenship, they want life.
Yeah.
Well, the one though that gets kicked out 4 times and then still comes back and then shoots somebody, you know that
Yeah.
That's why I
that was San
care.
Francisco. But well, so I guess that's the question. What's next class?
It's locked. Right now, it's
No, it's
Mary.
Mary
Just kidding.
Wollstonecraft, right?
Just kidding. I was getting excited for lock because of the timeline.
Mary Wollstonecraft. So if you had the chance, we also should have talked about Karl Marx.
Oh.
His argument against capitalism was that it was in
hot tears of noble people.
Oh, Carl and
I
last
wonder, would
second.
that young man, that rather grand young man, be surprised to hear that his first home had been turned into a museum?
So Karl Marx. I think I put him side saddle with Hobbes because, of course, Marx gives us communism, and communism has been an absolute dismal failure. Yes? Everyone agrees? So everyone basically agrees that
Theoretically, it's good.
Theoretically.
It's
Implementation
theory,
of communism has
no,
been a
no.
failure from.
People say
But
that
every
true communism hasn't happened.
every
That's a
attempt
cop-out.
to put it into play has been a miserable failure in every sense of the word.
Power
even
corrupt.
communists today point out that all communism is good for is a critique of modern capitalism. Because the critiques that Karl Marx makes, this is her point, actually, in this video, is that no one thinks communism would be an ideal form of government today, but what is important is his critiques of capitalism, because those critiques are actually still very good. So talking about the problem of the disparity of wealth and how that makes people feel, all of that is the alienation that people feel from their work and so on. All of those are good critiques, and that we can still learn from Karl Marx. So Marx is still worth being read and everything because of the idea that modern capitalism has to change. It's going to change. We're experiencing change.
Robots are beginning to take over.
Pardon?
Robots are taking over.
There's an awful lot of things that Marx certainly didn't predict.
You just started the jihad.
Wait,
but
something's
it's
taking
true.
over?
Robots will be. Robots are taking over.
jobs.
No, they don't want our jobs.
I think we
They're-
should have them installed in
Why
schools
not?
with automatic weapons, so anybody
Yeah.
who walks in with a weapon on
I
them.
saw this really funny picture on Facebook of so will librarians need silencers for their weapons? It's funny.
So wait,
Funny.
say that again because I want to hear what you said.
Would librarians need
Need
silencers?
silence.
Would the librarians need suppressors for? Okay, you know that's still 80 decibels, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's like this.
Dude, it was a joke.
But it's not that funny.
It is for
They're
me.
only good for like
I
30 to
don't
40
care.
rounds before they have to be rebuilt.
Humor is in the
Yeah.
ear of the beholder.
Thank you. Yes.
Of course, my favorite joke. Have I told you my favorite joke?
Probably, and I probably put it out of my head.
Why do little baby ducks walk softly?
I don't know, but I like it.
Because little baby ducks can't walk hardly.
Oh.
That's really cute.
Okay, on that note.
Oh
Yes,
my gosh.
on
So
that
more
note.
about Marx.
I mean, we have 7 minutes.
So feminism next class.
Dope.
Woohoo!
Let's go.
I'm excited.
Yeah, that should be
I hope everybody
Well,
shows up.
Yeah, not like the abortion class. Where
Half
it's
the
like
class is
5
just
dudes.
Yeah,
Dude,
yeah.
this is the most people
I
we've had.
watched
We're not
that.
qualified
I
for
was,
this.
There's one person.
that was
What we're
really
discussing.
funny. I felt bad because I was sick that day. But yeah, I watched that and I laughed while I was
We were trying to figure out like term names for like.
You
We're
were,
not
and it was
focused.
funny. It was very comedic to watch.
This was so long.
It's on next that one.
And did you want to talk about the term paper at all?
That's scary.
Oh yeah, does anybody have questions on the term paper? Because the stuff that you see it says on doing the syllabus isn't technically graded. He just puts that so y'all stay on track. Because I was totally freaking out last week.
Yeah,
Thanks, I was ready to just suck it up like
Oh,
a
no,
man
no,
and take some
no.
hits.
I'm
Okay.
scared.
Yeah, I was too. I was gonna say, I was gonna be like,
So, all right, everybody
damn it.
at ease, he just does that to make sure that we are aware things are happening still in class and outside. That
Don't
we do,
forget.
like,
You're the
you
best professor
If
ever.
you want to quit
Thank you, I
something,
tried.
I want
By the
just
way.
go to his syllabus and he'll do term project. It's we're 25% of our grade. It's got like 4 or 5 steps on it. It's super easy to follow and do. You literally just pick a philosopher and talk about their life, how you relate to them, and how are their views today still accepted unless it's somebody that's still alive today, which is you were pushing for, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I prefer you to pick living people
no offense, but
because that way.
Yeah.
Well, I had no clue
Yeah.
until like I actually asked him when I read it. I was like, oh. I was like, okay. So
Most people aren't aware that there are like living philosophers today. That I mean,
we do you.
Dude.
that would be weird.
Somebody's trying to get an A.
Yeah.
That's not a no.
No, it's not a. I
My
mean,
favorite
that would
If
be.
you do, you have to read it out loud in class because I want to hear all about it.
Yeah, I'm alive. I'm alive. You're a philosopher too, actually. Your
You do your
dad,
paper on
your
yourself.
dad, your mom, your grandpa.
Getting too deep for me.
Wow, I was like, bye.
I mean, by definition, a philosopher is someone who loves wisdom.
Dude.
I hate wisdom.
You know, I don't
Wow,
hate
okay.
wisdom. That's a wise thing to say.
Yeah, most old people who get wisdom eventually die, so
I feel like you're not allowed to be a philosopher unless you have a mustache or a beard.
Well,
Thus far.
that's kind of sexist.
Yeah, I mean,
I can grow a mustache. I've bleached mine. Dang it. However,
So that-
every
that-
single one we've seen
Status
has a beard or a mustache.
No, no.
The one
gotta
that
prove
the
you're
ones
wrong
that
now.
you pull
And they're
up.
all on fleek.
And they're all
They all have the.
I love the
I
ones
was
that
so
have
proud
like
that I
curls
learned
at
that
the
word
end.
a couple
Little
weeks
wax?
ago.
Yeah.
Oh man, I feel like I was young again.
Okay, yes. All right. She does not have a beard.
What real people do, and I think it's also not what good people do. I mean, I suppose you had a person who, in that situation, would really say, "Oh,
I
well,
personally
given
think
that
she's
work
the sexiest
comes in
philosopher
here,
alive.
I'm not going to care about my
I ain't throwing my mouth.
Is that a?
Wait,
Is
is
that
she
a?
supposed to have facial hair?
Look at her. She's not.
I showed her as an example of a philosopher who does not have
I bet
facial
you
hair.
she's a bearded
And I
woman.
think if you really feel what it is to love someone
No,
or some
thing is,
then you
this
value
was
that.
years ago, so she's a lot older now.
You will feel deeply.
She's in her 70s now, so
What Agamemnon felt,
she
even
doesn't look.
on a smaller level.
she was
which is
a motivating factor in your life years
I
ago.
think Agamemnon pretty clearly has to.
She's an
sacrifice
Aristotelian.
his daughter.
She's just like,
Still,
She's like enamored. It's
Yeah.
like, oh my god, everything you say, I'm eating it up.
All is well. In fact, in playing
That's what you're supposed to do when you're an interviewer.
You're supposed to go,
Well, it encourages you to keep talking. Look at someone like.
like,
you're not
whoa,
interested, I'm not gonna
please.
keep talking.
You can pick her too.
Just talk about how she's the sexiest philosopher and explain why.
Sadly, they all
Install a new SSD into a fresh install.
I'm still stoked to get Sam Harris on there. I'd consider him.
This helping segue into a forward-looking thought, and according
This
to
is her today.
anger and
Post-
passion.
Segway's about
The transition that happens too.
Segue.
Okay, so that's a technical term in my
About
head.
like the.
So the
The Segway, the machine that you drive around.
Yeah, it's just that it's about like a Segway.
Did that general
So you thought it came from Segway?
Yeah.
Not the other way around.
I've
No.
never seen the term itself.
That's my guy.
The more you know, you learn something every day.
From over here, I got pedals and I play DCS for digital connoisseurs, so jet flying.
That's Martha Nussbaum.
Yeah, the
She won the Kyoto Prize this year.
What is the Kyoto Prize?
It's a Japanese, like the Nobel Prize,
that's my other way.
but it's Japanese, so
It's cooler, just by default. 'Cause it's
All right, fine, I'll
Japanese.
see you on Thursday.
See ya.
Hasta la later.
yep,
Like how my computer
Thursday.
dies, the class
Tall guy
ended.
with beard, bye.
What time is it?
3:45.
Okay.
Those guys were all like, end the class, get up. Oh, look at the watch.
What?
They got up, they were like, oh man, end the class time. And then realized that it wasn't in the class yet, and he like stood around for a minute.
Oh, well, we were done. I thought I was going to have at least some folks that wanted to argue over whether or not the social contracts were man-made and that we're constantly